Hello, 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 hello. Welcome, everybody, welcome. We're about to start the program. If you could all come forward, please. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you so much. I am so proud and so humbled to get to MC this event. I grew up in a house with my single mum, my grandma and my auntie, and so they had their own kind of suffrage because of that. So, I want to just say thank you for all being here. This is great to see this room full of so many amazing women and amazing men, because you're the sort of men that we need in this planet, ones that support these amazing women that are in this room today. So thank you. Let's hear it all for. In 1848, Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton and other women gathered at Seneca Falls to sign the Declaration of Sentiments of Resolutions, outlining the goals for the emerging women's movement. Another of the earliest speakers to champion voting rights was Sojourner Truth. In 1867 speech, she said, "We want to carry the point to one particular thing, and that is women's rights, for nobody has any business with a right that belongs to her. I can make use of my own right. I want the same use of the same right. Do you want it? Then get it." If men had taken something that did not belong to them, they would not fear it. Between 1867 and the time the Women's Vote Amendment passed the House of Representatives in 1919, some 71 years after Seneca Falls kickoff, the all-male members of the legislative branch agreed to the 16th Amendment, which dealt with income taxes, the 17th Amendment, which dealt with the election and the terms of senators, and of course the 18th Amendment, outlawing alcohol, where the lone female representative, Janet Rankin, got in on the action. 100 years ago today, on June 4th, the Senate passed the amendment opening the vote to citizens regardless of their gender. The, at the time, outnumbered constitutional amendment was sent to the state for ratification. Maryland wasn't on board for the first iteration of the amendment, voting down the ratification in 1920. Women eventually got to vote after Tennessee was the clinch, the 36th state to ratify in August of 1920. It became the 19th Amendment. As an aside, Maryland eventually did get on board in 1941, finally voting to ratify. Didn't take long. It took another 18 years in February 1958 for the vote to be certified. Luckily, women have been voting for 38 years in our state by that time. For us here in the city of Annapolis, it took until 1973 for Older Woman of the Year in 2001 for a woman to be elected to the top job of mayor. We congratulate Ellen Moyer for her 2 terms in serving. I'd like to recognise Mayor Moyer and bring her up to unveil the plaque tonight, honouring the women who have served on our city in elected office. Ellen, if you would like to do the honours. Right there. I was looking for you out there.
Yes.
It took this long. How are you? Hey guys. How you doing? Thank you.
I don't think I've ever seen it like that.
You can just throw that under here.
Okay,
Do you
great.
want to change or do you want to stay?
No,
As is.
I'm staying.
Okay. Yeah. you
Yeah,
don't
it's
need
too
to
much
change.
stress.
Okay.
Good to know. Thank you.
Do you want me to take your bag?
Okay. Okay, who's got that really good whistle? Thank you. If you could just gather up the front here again, please. Another elected alderwoman is here tonight, Sheila Finlayson. Sheila, would you please read the names of all the elected people who are here tonight?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And for those who are present, please come up to the front as your name is called. The first woman to serve in our city council, Ms. Barbara Newstad, who was elected in 1973. Her daughter is here to join us. Ms. Ruth Gray, elected 1985. Is she deceased? Miss M. Teresa DeGraft, elected 1985. Miss Ellen Moyer, elected 1987. Ms. Louise Hammond, elected 1994. Ms. Sheila Tolliver, elected 1997. The first woman elected who knew sign language, Ms. Cynthia Abney Carter, elected 1997. She's not here to join us this evening, but she is doing very well in her new home in California. Ms. Classy Hoyle, elected 2001. Ms. Julie Stankovich, elected 2001. Welcome back. Of course, yours truly, Sheila Finlayson, elected 2007. Ms. Rhonda Pendell Charles. Rhonda, what was your year? 2013. In 2013. Ms. Eleanor Tierney, elected 2017. And lastly, Ms. Shanika Henson, elected 2017. Ladies and gentlemen, these are the women who've been elected to represent our city. The trailblazers, the new historians, the voices for all of our residents in the city. So thank you, ladies. Thank you. Can we get together for a photo? Get this thing out of the way.
Spread yourself back. I don't know who's taking the photo.
Okay. Ms. Moyer.
You know, I'm sure that all the aldermen have some interesting stories to tell about their terms in service in the wards that they were elected in. You know, there are 13 of us to 11 that are still alive, and in 300 years. And I'd just like to reflect a little bit on the difference that women make in the elected arena. Women always have been those that push for cultural and the social mores and and the morality and the ethics that we all should live by. And if you look around the different wards now, well, let me just talk to Ward 8 because I represented that for 14 years, longer than I was mayor, because there are no limits on re-electing alderwomen, aldermen. They can be re-elected forever, for a whole lifetime until they're 110, if that's how long that we can live. But the difference, I look at what you can accomplish in that small ward where you are. You're closer to the people. And while I was mayor, indeed, for 2 years, 2 terms, and I dearly loved it, and I loved the people I met, and the access that we had, and the kinds of things that happened, and the ideas that people brought, things you hadn't thought about before, and people brought ideas to you and said, that sounds good, can we do that? And we did do that, so that we were able to implement a number of things that came really from a broad idea bank. But just in Eastport, we were the first to do a whole bunch of things. We were the first to have an historic walking trail, the first to do, one of those murals. We were really aggressive on street trees. So when you come into Eastport now, you see trees, on the streets. We were really aggressive in the street end parks. These were all amenities, if you will, that people say they like where did you choose to live in this city? And I'm going to brag and say, well, we chose, not Ward 1, but we chose Eastport. We chose Eastport. And what were the things that you liked? It was the sense of open space. And that open space and a good feel that helped people see that, being in a neighborhood was an important thing, that there was a sense of community and a sense of pride and a sense of spirit. And you see that when you hear MRE, the Maritime Republic of Eastport, and we love it that way. And that all came up from the people who lived in that community and have made it such a vital, important thing. So there were just a lot of things. There were significant women in this community who were not elected, but the first live Christmas greens and the first lights that were, real lights, that was all a woman that did that. All of the theaters in this city are run, managed, and initiated by women. You wouldn't have those kinds of cultural trappings if it were not for the new power that women could bring to a community and not be totally dismissed, only semi-dismissed. We haven't quite gotten to, all the way. But nevertheless, there is a great deal of significance. I see Cynthia's yes to women vote, and I am sure that there may be, where's Julie? There may be other aldermen, alderwomen that might want to say a word or two about, their own wards and some of the things that they were able to accomplish. It is true, you do decide on a citywide basis, but there are some really special things that you can do in your own small community, your ward, that make a significant difference. And women have stepped up to the plate and done that because they think and act, probably because they're so used to working with families and kids, they think and act a little bit differently than men do, and that's okay, because you need both kinds of things that happen. So, if I could, Mr. Mayor, I would just like to ask if there were any of the other older women that would like to say something?
We have to give
No?
this thing back at 6:30.
Well, it's only 5 minutes and not even 5 o'clock yet. We've got an hour and a half. So if there's anyone that wants to speak up, speak up. Cynthia was, how she was elected, by the way. She was elected on a write-in. You talk about that.
Right on, Ellen.
Yeah, I'm not going to say too much of anything except for the fact that I appreciate this particular day, and I congratulate all the women who were recognized today, and thank the city of Annapolis for recognizing us. And it was quite a surprise to me when I was told this was going to happen. But I came, and everybody looked at me like this. I said, the necklace I have on here belonged to my grandmother, and she was born in 1902, and I'm here just kind of representing her and remembering her, who was out there when they were trying to vote during those years. And I used to be out there as a little girl passing out flyers on the street corners back there in the 40s when she was campaigning for some of the elected officials. But thank you everyone for having us here today, and God bless you all.
Ellen, just wait till the tug of war. No, I just want to say this is very timely because of the national issues that we're facing. I just can't help. I'm looking across at my new delegate and my new state senator and some of the women's health issues that are really serious and very timely, and guns and gun safety, and looking, at the future of our children and the environment. And I think that we have to keep that message alive and think about what the things we can do on the local level, and that I intend to do in my Ward 1. And thank you for this opportunity that we can all come together.
Thank you for this opportunity. I'm representing Ward 3, which is basically the parole area. And in our area, we have really highlighted our history, which is extremely important. It's a highlight of the Annapolis community. A lot of parole's history hasn't died, it just hasn't been remembered. So we've done a walk parole, a scavenger hunt for history, where we've highlighted about 55 or 60 spots and places of importance, and thank you, Roberta, for your help in that endeavor. And we're now naming several streets in honor of the people that have worked tirelessly in the parole area, and we're so very glad for that opportunity. So parole has its own distinction and uniqueness like every other ward, but we just like to bring that to the attention of everyone, because if you don't know your history, you don't know yourself. Thank you.
I just want to remember Clancy Hoyle, who was quite a foot soldier here in the community. She's the one that gave us the opportunity to be called Older Women. She passed that bill back there, I was at 2005, I think it was. Now we are older women and not men. Thank you.
Okay. So back to Ellie and Ward 1. Ellie, David Gerard and I have worked on a plan to stop the flooding on the Dock Street side, and this goes out to Ellen. We have to build a wall on the Compromise Street side, but Ellie said she's going to make Eastport pay for it. Next on the list of presenters, we have from way back in the day, Mary Church Terrell, a suffragist, a charter member of the NAACP, and an Annapolitan. Ms. Terrell, please come forward.
Thank you. It's an honor. All right, so I'm Scotty Preston, and you might notice that I am not dressed in my traditional period costuming. There were some challenges that went around to make that happen, so I almost didn't do this because, you get tethered to, oh, I've got to do this right, and I've got to be the... Well, you know what? I read the speech again, thanks to Hillary for sending it to me. And I said, this thing stands on its own merit. And I'm going to go there and interpret it as though I am her to some degree, as best I can. However, These words resonate today as strongly as they did when she wrote them in 1898. And so I feel comfortable wearing my own clothes because the fight goes on. All right. "50 years ago, a meeting such as this, planned, conducted, and addressed by women, would have been an impossibility. Less than 40 years ago, few sane men would have predicted that either a slave or one of his descendants would, in this century at least, address such an audience in the nation's capital at the invitation of women representing the highest, broadest, best type of womanhood that can be found anywhere in the world. Thus, to me, this semi-centennial of the National American Woman Suffrage Association is a double jubilee, rejoicing as I do, not only in the prospective enfranchisement of my sex, but in the emancipation of my race. When Ernestine Rose, Lucretia Mott, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Lucy Stone, and Susan B. Anthony began that agitation by which colleges were open to women and the numerous reforms inaugurated for the amelioration of their condition along all lines, their sisters who groaned in bondage had little reason to hope that these blessings would ever brighten their crushed and blighted lives. For during those days of oppression and despair, colored women were not only refused admittance to institutions of learning, but the law of the states in which the majority lived made it a crime to even teach them to read. Not only could they possess no property, but even their bodies were not their own. Nothing, in short, that could degrade or brutalize the womanhood of the race was lacking in that system from which colored women had little hope of escape. So gloomy were their prospects, so fatal the laws, so pernicious the customs only 50 years ago. But from the day that their fetters were broken and their minds released from the darkness of ignorance to which for more than 200 years they had been doomed, from the day they could stand erect in the dignity of womanhood, no longer bound but free, till tonight, colored women have forged steadily ahead in the acquisition of knowledge and in the cultivation of those virtues which make for good. To use a thought of the illustrious Frederick Douglass, if judged by the depths from which they have come, rather than the heights to which those blessed with centuries of opportunities have attained, colored women need not hang their heads in shame. Consider, if you will, the almost insurmountable obstacles which have confronted colored women in their efforts to educate and cultivate themselves since their emancipation. And I dare assert, not boastfully, but with pardonable pride, I hope, that the progress they have made and the work they have accomplished will bear a favorable comparison, at least with that of their more fortunate sisters. From the opportunity of acquiring knowledge and the means of self-culture have never been entirely withheld. For not only are colored women with ambition and aspiration handicapped on account of their sex, but they are everywhere baffled and mocked on account of their race. Desperately and continuously, they are forced to fight that opposition, born of a cruel, unreasonable prejudice which neither their merit nor their necessity seems to subdue. Not only because they are women, but because they are colored women, are the discouragement and disappointment disappointment meeting them at every turn. Avocations opened and opportunities offered to their more favorable sisters have been and are tonight closed and barred against them. While those of the dominant race have a variety of trades and pursuits from which they may choose, the woman through whose veins one drop of African blood is known to flow is limited to a pitiful few. So overcrowded are the avocations in which colored women may engage, and so poor is the pay in consequence that only the barest livelihood can be eked out by the rank and file. And yet, in spite of the opposition encountered, the obstacles opposed to their acquisition of knowledge and their accumulation of property, the progress made by colored women along these lines has never been surpassed by that of any people in the history of the world. Though the slaves were liberated less than 40 years ago, penniless and ignorant, with neither shelter nor food, so great was their thirst for knowledge and so Herculean were their efforts to secure it, that there are today hundreds of Negroes, many of them women, who are graduates, some of them having taken degrees from the best institutions in the land. From Oberlin, that friend of the oppressed, Oberlin, my dear alma mater, whose name will always be loved and whose praise will always be sung as the first college in the country, which was just, broad, and benevolent enough to open its doors to Negroes and to women on an equal footing with men. From Wellesley and Vassar, from Cornell and Ann Arbor, from the best high schools throughout the North, East, and West, colored girls have graduated with honors and have thus forever settled the question of their capacity and their worth. But a few years ago, in an examination in which a large number of young women and men competed for a scholarship entitling the successful competitor to an entire course through the Chicago University, the only colored girl among them stood first and captured this great prize. And so wherever colored girls have studied, their instructors bear testimony to their intelligence, diligence, and success. With this increase of wisdom, there has sprung up in the hearts of colored women an ardent desire to do good in the world. No sooner had the favored few availed themselves of such advantages as they could secure, they hastened to dispense these blessings to the less fortunate of their race. With tireless energy and eager zeal, colored women have, since their emancipation, been continuously prosecuting the work of educating and elevating their race, as though upon themselves alone devolved the accomplishment of this great task. Of the teachers engaged in instructing colored youth, it is perhaps no exaggeration to say that fully 90% are women. In the backwoods, remote from the civilization and comforts of the city and town, on the plantations reeking with ignorance and vice, our colored women may be found battling with evils such as conditions always entail. Many a heroine of whom the world will never hear has thus sacrificed her life to her race amid surroundings and in the face of privations which only martyrs can tolerate and bear. Shirking responsibility has never been a fault with which colored women might be truthfully charged. Infatigably and conscientiously, in public work of all kinds, they engage and they may benefit and elevate their race. The result of this labor has been prodigious indeed. By banding themselves together in the interest of education and morality, by adopting the most practical and useful means to this end, colored women in the 30 short years have become a great power for good. Through the National Association of Colored Women, which was formed by the union of two large organizations in July of 1896, and which is now the only national body among colored women, much good has been done in the past, and more will be accomplished in the future, we hope. Believing that it is only the home that a people can become really good and truly great, the National Association of Colored Women has entered that sacred domain. Homes, more homes, better homes, purer homes is the text upon which ours have been and will be preached. Through mothers' meetings, which are a special feature of the work planned by the association, much useful information in pertaining everything to the home will be disseminated. We would have heart-to-heart talks with our women that we may strike at the root of evils, many of which lie, alas, at the fireside. If the women of the dominant race, with all the centuries of education, culture, and refinement back of them, with all their wealth of opportunities ever present with them, if these women feel the need of a mother's Congress that they might enlighten as to the best methods of rearing children and conducting their homes, how much more do our women from shackles have but yesterday fallen need information on the same vital subjects? And so throughout the country, we are working vigorously and conscientiously to establish mothers' congresses in every community in which our women can be found. Under the direction of the Tuskegee, Alabama branch of the National Association, the work of bringing the light of knowledge and the gospel of cleanliness to the benighted sisters on the plantations has been conducted with signal success. Their efforts have thus far been confined to 4 estates comprising of thousands of acres of land on which live hundreds of colored people, yet in the darkness of ignorance and the grip of sin, miles away from churches and schools. Under the evil influences of plantation owners and through no fault of their own, the condition of the colored people is, in some sections today, no better than it was at the close of the war. Feeling the great responsibility resting upon them, therefore, colored women, both in organizations under the National Association and as individuals, are working with might and main to afford their unfortunate sisters opportunities of civilization and education, which without them, they would be unable to secure. By the Tuskegee Club and many others all over the country, object lessons are given in the best way to sweep, dust, cook, wash, and iron, together with other information concerning household affairs. Talks on social purity and the proper method of rearing children are made for the benefit of those mothers who in many instances fall short of their duty, not because they are vicious and depraved, but because they are ignorant and poor. Against the one-room cabins so common in the rural settlements in the South, we have inaugurated a vigorous crusade. When families of 8 or 10, consisting of men, women, and children, are all huddled together in a single apartment, a condition of things found not only in the South, but among our poor all over the land, there is little hope of inculcating morality or modesty. And yet, in spite of these environments, which are so destructive of virtue, and though the safeguards usually thrown around maidenly youth and innocence are in some sections withheld from colored girls, statistics compiled by men not inclined to falsify in favor of my race show that immortality among colored women is not so great as among women in countries like Austria, Italy, Germany, Sweden, and France. In New York, a mission has been established and is entirely supported by colored women under supervision of the New York City Board. It has in operation a kindergarten, classes in cooking and sewing, mothers' meetings, men's meetings, a reading circle, and a manual training school for boys. Much the same kind of work is done by the Colored Women's League and the Ladies Auxiliary of this city, the Kansas City League of Missouri, the Women's Era Club of Boston, the Women's Loyal Union of New York, and other organizations representing almost every state in the Union. The Phyllis Wheatley Club of New Orleans, another daughter of the National Association, has in 2 short years succeeded in establishing a sanatorium and a training school for nurses. The conditions which caused the colored women of New Orleans to choose this special field in which to operate are such as exist in many other sections of our land. From the city hospitals, colored doctors are excluded altogether, not even being allowed to practice in the colored wards and on colored patients, no matter how wealthy they are not received at all unless they are willing to go into the charity wards. Thus, the establishment of a sanatorium answers a variety of purposes. It affords colored medical students an opportunity of gaining practical knowledge of their profession, and it furnishes a well-equipped establishment for colored patients who do not care to go to the charity wards of the public hospitals. The daily clinics have been a great blessing to the colored poor. In the operating department, supplied with all the modern appliances, 200 operations have been performed, all of which have resulted successfully under the colored surgeon-in-chief. Of the 8 nurses who have registered, 1 has already passed an examination before the State Medical Board of Louisiana and is now practicing her profession. During the yellow fever epidemic in New Orleans last summer, there was a constant demand for Phyllis Wheatley nurses. By indefatigably energy and heroic sacrifice of both money and time, those noble women raised nearly $1,000 with which to defray the expenses of the sanatorium for the first 8 months of its existence. They have recently succeeded in securing from the city of New Orleans an annual appropriation of $240, which they hope will soon be increased. Dotted all over the country are charitable organizations for the aged, orphaned, and poor, which have been established by colored women. Just how many, it is difficult to state, since there is such an imperative need of statistics bearing on the progress, possessions, and prowess of colored women. The National Association has undertaken to secure this data of such value and importance to the race. Among the charitable institutions either founded, conducted, or supported by colored women may be mentioned the Hale Infirmary of Montgomery, Alabama, the Carrie Steele Orphanage of Atlanta, the Reed Orphan Home of Covington, the Haynes Industrial School of Augusta in the state of Georgia, a home for the aged of both races at New Bedford, and St. Monica's Home of Boston in Massachusetts. Old Folks Home in Memphis, Tennessee, Colored Orphans Home, Lexington, Kentucky, together with others of which time forbids me to speak. Mount Meigs Institute is an excellent example of work originated and carried into successful execution by a colored woman. The school was established for the benefit of colored people on the plantations in the Black Belt of Alabama. Because of the 700,000 Negroes living in that state, probably 90% are outside of the cities. And WA was selected because in the township of Mount Meigs, the population is practically all colored. Instruction given in this school is of the kind best suited to the needs of those people for whom it was established. Along with their scholastic training, girls are taught everything pertaining to the management of a home, while boys learn practical farming, carpentry, wheelwrighting, blacksmithing, and have some military training. Having started with almost nothing only 8 years ago, the trustees of the school now own 9 acres of land and 5 buildings in which 2,000 pupils have received instruction, all through the courage, the industry, and sacrifice of one good woman. The Chicago clubs and the several others engage in rescue work among fallen women and tempted girls. Questions affecting our legal status as a race are also constantly agitated by our women. In Louisiana and Tennessee, colored women have several times petitioned the legislatures of their respective states to repeal the obnoxious Jim Crow laws, nor will any stone be left unturned until this iniquitous and unjust enactment against respectable American citizens be forever wiped from the statutes of the South, against the barbarous convict lease system of Georgia, of which Negroes, especially the female prisoners, are the principal victims. Colored women are waging a ceaseless war by 2 lecturers, each of whom, under the Women's Christian Temperance Union, has been nationalist superintendent of work among colored people. The cause of temperance has for many years been eloquently espoused. In business, colored women have had signal success. There is in Alabama a large milling and cotton business belonging to and controlled entirely by a colored woman who has sometimes as many as 75 men in her employ. In Halifax, Nova Scotia, the principal ice plant of the city is owned and managed by one of our women. In the I will soon wrap this up. I'm just trying to spread the good news. Having said that, I'll just finish with the last segment here in which we talk about our children. No, I'll skip that because that's long too. And so, lifting as we climb onward and upward we go, struggling and striving and hoping that the buds and blossoms of our desires will burst into glorious fruition ere long. With courage born of success achieved in the past, with a keen sense of responsibility which we shall continue to assume, we look forward to a future large with promise and hope, seeking no favors because of our color, nor patronage because of our needs. We knock at the bar of justice, asking only for an equal chance. Thank you. This goes to the prolific, all your clapping is to the prolific Mary Church Terrell. And if you want to know more about her, she's everywhere, Wikipedia. In fact, I think Janice Hayes Williams published something today on her Facebook page. So anyway, thank you for your time.
Sorry about that, because we're going to get kicked out of here soon. So thank you again. Let's hear it for Scotty. So we're nearing the end of our program. I'd like to point out some of the banners around the room. They are here courtesy of the National Women's Party and Preservation Maryland. We thank those 2 organisations for the loan. We're now going to hear from Dr. Linda Boyd. Dr. Boyd is representing Delta Sigma Theta sorority, where she is a chapter officer and a member of the executive committee in the Annapolis Alumni Chapter. The Deltas were active in the suffrage movement and marched down Pennsylvania Avenue in 1913 in what was then a very dangerous act. Protesters were pushed, shoved, tripped and spat upon. As it was described at the time, police did not hold the mobs back. Dr. Boyd, thank you. Thank you.
Good evening. As Mayor Buckley said, I'm Linda Boyd, and I'm representing the Annapolis chapter of Delta Sigma Theta sorority. Our president, Naz Afi, who is out of town, asked me to deliver the message for her in representing our chapter. Delta Sigma Theta Incorporated is a private, non-profit organization whose purpose is to provide assistance and support through established programs in local communities throughout the world. It was founded in 1913 by 22 phenomenal trendsetters at Howard University who wanted to use their collective strength to promote academic excellence and to provide assistance to those in need, and who saw no limit to their vision for sisterhood, scholarship, and service. In March of 1913, nearly 6 weeks after they were founded, the 22 founders stepped out on faith and marched in the historic Women's Suffrage March in Washington, D.C., in which Mary Terrell was one of the founders. They took a stand for social justice as their first public act, and over 100 years later, the Annapolis chapter takes pride in following in the footsteps of our founders and remain in the forefront of action as a voice for those in need. Since its founding in 1913, more than 200,000 women have joined Delta Sigma Theta sorority, and there are over 1,000 collegiate and alumni chapters located in the United States, Japan, Germany, the Virgin Islands, Bermuda, the Bahamas, Jamaica, and the Republic of Korea. And they work diligently each year servicing their communities. The Annapolis chapter of Delta Sigma Theta was chartered in December 9th, 1947. Our chapter charter members included, and those of you who may have been around at the time when Bates High School was still open, all 5 of these ladies were teachers there. Soror Lois Randall, Muriel Holland, Ruby Sims, Sylvia Richardson, and Mary Campbell Brown. Our members walk in footsteps of the sorority's founders, implementing programs in alignment with the national organization's 5-point programmatic thrust. And they are educational development, economic development, international awareness and involvement, physical and mental health, and political awareness and involvement. The chapter continues to make significant contributions to Anne Arundel County and the city of Annapolis. The chapter conducts certain programs intentionally focused on the success of young women. We have our Betty Shabazz Delta Academy, partnering with the Boys and Girls Club of Annapolis, where we provide academic, social, and technical resources to help prepare young girls to be successful in the 21st century. We also have the Delta Gems program, which addresses the needs of young African American women between the ages of 11 and 14 and involves girls in service, learning, and community service. And the third program, the Thelma T. Daly STEM Initiative, which we provide and encourage interest in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Today is a day of celebration and recommitment to uplifting the women in our Annapolis and Anne Arundel County community. The Annapolis chapter of Delta Sigma Theta pledges to continue collaborating with organizations in our community in the plans, projects, and promotions to assist, impact, and serve, and transform the communities of Annapolis and Anne Arundel County. We stand always to serve and advocate the community. And just one comment, former Alderwoman Classy Hall was also a member of our chapter.
Thank you, Dr. Boyd. Thank you so much. I'd like to recognise some of the other women who are here tonight who are elected to other offices in our community. Alice Kane is here. Senator Sarah Althworth is here. Jocelyn here? Jocelyn's not? No, okay. Delegate Heather Bagnall. Shanika still here or no? Oh, there you go. Vicky Gibson was here. And the Honourable Carl Snowden. We are moving. Scott Travis is here, representing Senator Van Hollands, who was here. I'd also like to give a really big thank you to Janice Hayes-Williams for helping with our program. She was really instrumental in this. And of course, thank you to Hilary Radovich from my office for putting this whole event together. Hilary, great job. And I'd like to recognise a fellow feminist, my blue brother, Stuart Pittman. Been a great champion of hiring women in his administration. So thank you, county executive. Thank you. On a personal note, I believe that getting women to the top tiers of power and elective office should be something that every man who is in a position of power does with strong intention. I'd like to recognise a couple of women who keep our city running smoothly. Susie Smith was here. And our city manager, Teresa Sutherland. Across America, we now have more women elected in office than at any time in American history. Still, the threats to women's rights are real, and we all need to maintain vigilance. Finally, to wrap up, let me turn to the words of Elizabeth Cady Stanton. She finished an 1868 speech in Washington by calling for an extension of suffrage. She said, "Surely a government of the most virtuous, educated men and women would be better represented the whole and protect the interests of all than could be represented by either sex alone." I could not agree more. Congratulations for 100 years of voting. Let's have a big round of applause for that. And on a final note, we only have till 6:30. So thank you all. Cheers. Thank you.